We are gathered to talk about a topic that is, I called it a landmine, actually. The idea of the franchise directory going away. The directory was in effect for 5 years, preceded by the registry, which was in effect for 20 years, from 1998 to 2018, then the directory, 2018 to 2023, and now there is no official SBA document, but FranData has a certification product that they are pushing, but it is not necessarily endorsed or supported. I mean, it's not, the SBA is not against it, but they have not endorsed it as the replacement for what's out there. And so the thing we were challenged to discuss today is how are we getting around that? What impact is that having on franchise development and obtaining funding? And what are some of the experts out there doing to mitigate that? And so first I would like to ask my panel to introduce themselves and what their brand is, and then we will go from there. Kim, I'll start with you.
Good morning. I'm Kim Gubera, the CEO of PerTech USA. We have about 175 units, 154 of them open right now. And I've been with the brand for 8.5 years. My second brand, 24 years in franchising.
Hey, my name is Rob Cambruzzi. I'm founder and CEO of the Repum Group. We represent 16 different brands in various different spaces, but we're essentially an FSO. Hate that word because we do a little bit more than that. We actually open up the units and have operations as well. But yeah, we're all about the growth, so we'll talk about that.
Hi, I'm Chris Pena. I'm the president and founder of Body 20. We are a fitness-based concept. We have 322, 23 awarded, and we're closing in on 100 open. We should be there by the end of the year.
Eric Schechterman, the Vice President of Franchise Finance for Unleash Brands. Unleash Brands is a youth enrichment franchise platform where we have 7 different franchise brands operating over 1,500 locations throughout the country.
Well, I guess I rudely forgot to introduce my own self. I'm a rookie here. My name is Sherry Sieber. I'm the president of FranFund, and I hope you will indulge me by celebrating our #1 position from funding companies in the Entrepreneur Magazine. We're really proud of that. Eric is one of my favorite people. He's a former competitor. And so I am going to ask him. He has a lot of knowledge, and we're going to call on a lot of that today for him to sort of sort out some of our questions. But Eric, if you wouldn't mind, there's a lot of industry confusion right now. Directory, registry, who needs it, who doesn't, why do we need it, should we pay for it, blah, blah, blah. Would you kindly sort of set the stage for us?
Absolutely, and I think that confusion didn't start now. I think it started even when the directory first kind of came to fruition years back. I mean, how many in the room would say because they were on the directory that they were SBA approved? Because I would hear it all the time from brands. And it's like franchisors acted like I sent my information to the SBA and they have said we're a good franchise and we should be able to get an SBA loan. The SBA looked at nothing of your earnings, how well your franchisees are doing, whether the model made sense or doesn't make sense. But everyone pushed it that way. What the role of the government was to make sure that you meet the requirements of operating as a franchise like the FTC defines it. That you support the franchisee, that there's certain aspects of ownership and change of ownership in the form of, separation. But everybody started pushing it like they've gotten this stamp of approval that they deserve an SBA loan. And it really had nothing to do with that. So I think that's where the confusion started. And then we also had the registry. And I think the best way to understand the difference between the two is the directory was there to let banks know, could they do a loan for your brand? The registry was there and is there to let the banks know, should they do a loan for your brand? So can the bank do it? Yes. Now you're working on the registry side of saying, here's why our business is a good business to lend to. And that's really more of what the difference is, but I think it got jumbled to thinking the directory never replaced the registry. Now that the directory's gone, the registry's not replacing it. I think understanding the difference between those two and understanding what your role as the franchisor is first before people start kind of jumping and panicking and start kind of cutting before they measure.
So Eric, I'm going to stick with you just one more second, please. So what is the SBA expecting from lenders?
It's a good question. I mean, essentially, they want to know, I mean, when you're a lender, the reason you participate in the SBA loan, let's face it, because you have that government backing. If, God forbid, there's a negative outcome on that loan, the government is essentially backing the bank for a percentage of that loan. And for those of you that in the room still think an SBA loan is the government lending your franchisee money, it's not. These are banks lending money. They're getting backed by the government through the SBA program. And if there is a default situation, the bank needs to show the SBA that that was a creditable lending decision of why they gave that loan so that they can get that guarantee fulfilled. So they want to show, yes, we looked, is this franchise an actual good operating franchise, meets those requirements? Did we do certain levels of underwriting? So they just really want to, I mean, something's never changed in business. That lovely acronym CYA does apply to a lot of things. That's ultimately what the role of kind of the SBA with the banks are, is that they want to make sure that they're covering their you-know-what and making sure that they didn't just say, yeah, we just gave a loan to any business no matter what they did.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so Rob, I'm going to move along to you. You represent today 16 brands, but you've been at this a really long time, and so I'm sure over your history, I don't even know how many brands that is, but significant number. And so you have no doubt encountered all sorts of these issues. So how do you prepare today?
Yeah, I think a lot of our due diligence on the front end is understanding what makes a brand, right? How do they go to market? How are they operating, right? So it's all about making sure the team is there. You have to have the processes there. So it just goes back to the roots of the brand infrastructure, right? These banks are looking at the same kind of stuff. If you don't have the right infrastructure, it's really hard to get people to buy into it. It's really hard to get a loan, right? So it's all about making sure that if you're an emerging brand, do you have all those components, right? Are you ready to go to market? Are you ready to sell those franchises? And if you are, how are you going to back them up, right? They want to see that there's a system and processes to support these franchisees so that if they do give these loans, it's not out to, la-la land. It's actually a great process. It's, solidified.
Absolutely. Chris, you have the most recent experience from an emerging brand to growing to where you are today, and congratulations for that. But you want to talk a little bit about the pitfalls of emerging brands and the due diligence that you need to do to avoid some of the pitfalls that come with starting a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the things that we fixed, we learned right here, first of all. So that's kind of where my focus will be.
Springboard, right?
Yeah, what do I wish I knew back then? So I think number one, it's, as Rob said, you've got to work with a partner who understands the process if you're new, because you're probably not going to, right? Brands like FranFund are great for that. They'll work with you to make sure that there are banks before you have candidates that are willing to lend. I think one thing most emerging franchisors don't realize is if I sell you a franchise and you're intending to take a loan and it's 9 months later and you can't get funded, you're going to want your money back. And the problem is, as an emerging franchisor, you probably spent that money, right? So you get into this bad cycle of I need to sell another one to refund this one, or whatever the case is. And you see a lot of early franchisors do that. So I think understanding from a partner what is necessary for me to get funded, whether that's new infrastructure in your business, as Rob said, or that's generally understanding what does the lending environment need for your business, which is more high risk than an established brand, right? So maybe a little higher net worth ratio, more cash on hand. That way, when you're bringing a candidate in, you're talking to them about that up front. You're making sure they have it. Don't just take their word for it. Don't get a pre-written PFS. Plenty of services out there that'll validate their financials for you, their credit scores. Make sure that you see that first, and that'll ease the tension in that process. And we all know that sales don't matter, openings do, and they can't get open if they don't get funded. So the faster you can get them to funding, the better. Most people like Fran Fund, we'll actually start working with them before they sign to get them a pre-approval. It's a condition at Body 20 at least that you have to be pre-approved for your financing before you can come in the door. So.
And I'll just add to that. I mean, one of the things that we do with our brands before we ever launch is actually go to some of our partners like Fran Fund and have them take a look at what are the qualifications that we should be hunting for so that we're not out there guessing, right? If you take the guesswork out of it, you pull in, I like to say, aces in their places, right? There's many groups, they're one of the best, but at the end of the day, if you have someone looking at and they're saying, here's the criteria which we think we can get funding for, they know what the banks want, pull in the ace, make sure you know what you're doing before you go out to market.
Kim, you have a comment to that? Go
I
ahead.
was just going to add on to what Chris said. What we've seen a lot, and I left out that I'm a CPA by training. I'm an accountant, not a finance person, but educating your candidates and the people you've awarded franchises to about what they're about to embark on. And I'm sure you guys help with that as well. But I think even as the franchisor, you have some level of due diligence. I think we've made some mistakes in the past thinking that, oh, this person ran businesses before. They know how this process is going to be. No, they do not. They bought a house before. They know that it's going to be it's going to be very similar to that. They're going to have to provide a lot. And so we still sometimes kind of find holes of where we didn't really educate people ahead of time to know what this is going to look like. And maybe it does go 9 months. Maybe it goes 6 months. It can be a long haul.
So Kim, do you guys have a formal process for educating your candidates on the loan prep process?
I'm going to say yes, but the, Fran Dev people, I do love them. You need them. They are not always rule followers. So I do love them. You got to have them, right? But that's not their strong suit. So I think just having, as myself as a CEO, I'm very involved with my Fran Dev team to know what's happening with individuals. I just had a very bad experience with an individual getting financing, so that has kind of tightened up. They ended up not getting it because they had lied on their application, which again, you don't think people are going to do that. So I think just keeping close tabs if you are in senior leadership with those people that are doing that to make sure it's happening.
Since you said that, the joke among all of us is if you're a buyer, they're a liar. I mean, since we see all these funding applications, people tend to leave or add zeros to their net worth or subtract zeros for their outstanding loan balances and things like that, whereas as a franchisor, if you took a glance at their financials, they look pretty good. And then when you start, dipping into the facts there, you find out there's a little hair on that deal.
When everything's a flat number, ask questions. When somebody has exactly $50,000 in their checking account and exactly $150,000 here, they didn't give you all the information because nobody has that exact number. There's usually a variance of that, so yeah.
Since you've got the microphone, tell me what lenders look at. Is item 19 important to lenders?
So, I would say yes, but I think the more important point is, I always love that saying where they say, if someone's going to build your culture, you're going to do it, or your employees or your customers are going to do it for you, and it might not be the culture that you want. The story of your brand is going to be told to a lender. Either you're going to guide them to where you want that story to be and what you want them to focus on, or they're going to choose what to focus on. And if a bank chooses what to focus on, they're going to go right to the item 19, look at the numbers. We don't think that's enough, or we don't think there's enough open, or whatever it may be, and they're going to make their own decisions, make their own stories. They're going to look at, oh, well, they had 3 closed last year. We don't like that. And if you allow them to put their eyes where they want to go and make their own decisions, that's what's going to happen. If you're not looking at lenders as just like you would look at candidates for your brand, they are people you need to sell your brand to. And if you don't have somebody internally that does that, or a partner that does that, and you have nobody doing it, trust me, it's being done, but it's being done by people that know nothing about franchising, nothing about your business model, nothing about the ramp-up time. And I assure you, if you're an emerging brand, if your first 20 locations have been amazing, the bank does not care. If you have less than 50 locations open, you are viewed as an emerging brand. Maybe it doesn't hurt you, but it does not get looked at as a positive of any of your operations thus far. So you have to make sure that you're directing them where you want to. So yes, item 19s are important, but you know what parts you want to show and want them to focus on, and I would allow that to happen in either that's why having partners that know what they're doing and know what lenders are looking for. Banks all have different appetites. Some like chocolate, some like vanilla. And if you bring a vanilla deal to a chocolate bank, it doesn't matter how good it is, they're going to turn it down. And the problem is they never say, this is just not our appetite. They'll come up with a reason about your brand instead. It's too new. We don't like trampoline parks like Urban Air. And it's like, well, it's not a trampoline park, and it's the most successful SBA loan in the last 10 years of the entire program. But they've already gotten in their own way. And again, if you let them decide what story, so the item 19 is important. The more that you can provide, the better. Don't be afraid of what you can provide in there. It's going to come out anyway. So I'd rather get that information up front and be able to control the narrative, because if you don't put it in there, trust me, they're going to find it out anyway.
Chris, I've seen some enthusiastic head shaking there. Please continue.
Yeah, I think, what I take from that as somebody who's been a founder, I've been in the sales process, I'm sure a lot of people in this room are in the development process, is it's not just, partner with the lender and let them do all the work. I think that is where you're not going to succeed. It's partner with the lender so they can introduce the right people, but know that the underwriters, the people who are making the decision on whether or not to fund your franchisee and whether or not to do business with you as a brand, they're people too, right? Bring them to your units, show them why you're unique, show them your leadership team, show them what your differentiators are, and not just, hey, my first five franchisees make money. Great, they could be the most successful business owners in the world. It's not enough of them for them to believe. It's what are we doing on the back end to sustain growth? Are we scalable? All those things are what's going to get an underwriter to say, you have 5 units, but I'll take a chance and allocate $3 million to your business, right?
You want to continue that discussion, Rob? How important is item 19 to you, or?
Yeah, I mean, item 19 is obviously important, but I actually want to switch it because I think item 7 is really, really important. And how many, by raise of hands, are there brick and mortar concepts in here? Good amount. Okay, great. So, I mean, look, if you don't get that right, it's going to be the death of your brand, right? And it can lead to a ton of litigious things. And so the bank is looking at that window of, the range that you're providing. And it's all about making sure that range is actually not just for where you're located, it's nationwide, right? So as you expand your brand, you're getting into California, you're getting into Florida, wherever you are today, it's going to expand, right? So you need to make sure that item 7 is dialed in to a point where if you go to a bank and now you sold one in California and they have to deal with building out a unit that, has seismic, issues and things like that they have to equate for, it's all about making sure those numbers are right. And find the people that know. If you don't guess. Make sure you go out there and find the resources to make sure that number is right, because it will be the death of you if it's not.
Litigious is a good word to use in that sentence. There's a few things going on right now. So getting back to the reason we're all standing here, registry, directory, all those sorts of things. Chris, are you missing the franchise directory?
It was funny. We were talking in a Zoom about this panel, and I made the comment that the only reason we were ever on it is because the franchisee asked us to be. I don't think it ever made a difference for us. No.
Rob?
It used to be a big deal, and I don't think it is anymore, to be honest.
Kim, you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I even checked with my team and just said, hey, what have you heard about this? And it's been really a non-issue, surprisingly.
I mean, essentially, the lenders are responsible for their own due diligence before they do a loan. This is pretty basic So, yeah, we're not finding lenders forcing us to provide any type of support.
What I will add towards that is keep in mind, you have a well-established brand, you have a FSO that vets all of their brands before they onboard them, works with a funding partner. Body 20 works with a funding partner. Notice how they've all said they don't feel that there's a need for it because somebody is telling their story. So if you don't have one of those, it might be a good idea to look at something like the registry or one of those certifications or products. So just keep in mind, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the story. They have somebody that's working on that daily for them. If that's not something that you're going to do or something that you want to do, then that is a product that you might want to consider because you need something that you don't want the lender saying, okay, it's on for me to figure this out, I'll go figure it out, where they either have a partner that's driving that or they have some information that's readily available that you've seen before they have. So just, you have to pick one, for lack of better words. And for all of you, I've spoke to an emerging brand this morning. They said, oh, yeah, funding, we're not ready for that. And I was just like, excuse me? I don't know how that makes sense, but, my favorite line ever is sometimes you don't know what you need until you need it. I heard that once from a guy who was talking about a bulletproof vest, and he said, you never think about wearing one until you get shot. So trust me, you'll have a candidate that doesn't get financing and go through all those things because you didn't realize these things matter now.
Kim?
I think that's a really good point. Being a brand that has gone through a major transition in the last just 11 months ago, being purchased by private equity, being put on a growth trajectory, our history was not to be involved in funding at all. I know that seems very strange, but that's why I think our growth for the first 16 years of the brand was minimal at best to about 50 units. All of our growth has been since we started dabbling in it, and now we're really, really fully involved in that. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. Be prepared. You're going to need to be involved.
Well, we worked with, I'm sorry, Chris, did you want to comment?
I just
Go ahead.
wanted to add, I said in that first kind of question you asked me that you need to have a process on your end. I think, if you're not getting involved in that franchisee's funding, it's not just that they will take forever to get the funding done or they may not get approved. They may take bad funding. And there's nothing worse for your system than somebody who they stack credit cards and stack home equity lines and all these different things. And next thing you know, your business is profitable, but it's not because they have such high debt service that they just can't become a profitable franchisee.
Well, I'm going to continue on that. We've worked with Rob for a really long time, and there are many franchisors that when we tell them that their candidate is not qualified, they go on a tirade about what a good franchisee they're going to be if we could only find money. Rob doesn't do that, and we greatly appreciate that. So we have a trusting relationship that we're not going to dump anybody that could be funded, and you don't want anybody that can't be funded. Can you elaborate on how that works in your system?
Yeah, I think it all comes down, you heard this a million times, it's about systems and processes, right? We have in our system, we sell north of 600 licenses a year amongst our brands. And so we actually have folks just on staff that do the qualification side of things. And actually, before we book time on calendars and things like that, it's part of the application process to earn that time with our people so that we're getting ahead of it, right? And then it's revisited throughout the entire process numerous times. And I think someone mentioned lots of zeros and round numbers. Look, that stuff comes through conversations, right? It comes through by having a good sales process that you sniff that out over time. And by the time it's actually discovery day and they're ready to buy, you will know whether they have it or don't have it. And if you do partner with someone like FranFund, they can get before discovery day a pre-approval, understanding that it's almost 99% guarantee that these guys are going to be funded. Don't spend the money and the time with people that aren't. That's the bottom line. It's just not worth it. It'll waste your time and money as well. So
That's the quote of the day right there. I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience because, again, we haven't pounded on the directory, registry, or whatever the requirements are Does anybody have any questions at all on this directory issue or on anything funding related? Yes, ma'am.
I apologize if you answered this. I was lost in this building. Funding sources. Like, how do you find, you just go to any banks, or are there specific franchise funding organizations?
I don't think moderators are really supposed to do all the talking, but man, you just
You call
hit a
you
sweet
call her.
spot.
That's what you do. You call her.
I'll just say this, and Eric said a minute ago when he was talking about lenders with different appetites, what happens is, first of all, you get somebody that goes into a local bank and they find either a attractive young male or female sitting behind a beautiful mahogany desk, and they sit down and say, well, I'm thinking about opening this business. They're nodding like this the entire time. Well, I think I'd like to get a loan for it. They're nodding like this. Will you guys do loans for this? Yes. I mean, so they have a conversation that had a lot of yeses in it, but none of them will you do a loan for me? And so, first of all, the guys in the lobby of the bank, they have nothing to do with lending. They're trying to get checking accounts, savings accounts, stocks, bonds, whatever, okay? So, especially for emerging brands, going to a local bank and finding a relationship is very difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is difficult. As brands reach level of maturity and, dare I say, notoriety, once they're known, then it makes it much easier. Then that lender, sometimes they have very desirable. I mean, for example, the Urban Air, which is not a trampoline park, but it has a very high total project cost, and lenders like that. They don't necessarily want to do 20 of them because they don't, they're all risk averse. But finding a partner, I have competitors. You can look in the Entrepreneur magazine and see who they are. After number one. Sorry. Just kidding. But anyway, that is a good place to start. Go and find somebody.
What you're saying is, it sounds like you're a lender, so there's certain lenders that specialize in franchising, lending for franchises.
Okay, so yes, that is true, but also my company and companies like mine, they consolidate multiple funding solutions under one roof. And that's really your best way of introducing your candidate to funding, because perhaps they can't qualify for an SBA loan, but they could do a 401k rollover. They might be able to do an unsecured loan. They might be able to get a loan against their marketable securities in a wealth portfolio or something like that. They might do home equity. And so companies like ours will discuss all those possibilities with the candidate and direct them to the right place, versus them getting highly disappointed by walking into that local bank and thinking that they're pre-approved and really nothing has happened.
I just want to add to that because I think it's really important. I mean, there's numerous ways to get funded, obviously, and hopefully you guys know this, but I would say a significant amount of what we do is through the 401k rollover process. That's like voodoo to people when they hear it. They don't understand it. If you walk into a bank that's not familiar with it, they're going to be like, that's total crap. And it's not, because I would tell you probably 50% or more of what we see is through that process. So if you don't know about it, you definitely need to come up and talk with this lady.
Eric, why don't you explain it in case there
Well,
are...
but even before on that, I think Sherry's also being very diplomatic, and I think still being on the supplier side, I'm not anymore, so I can say, and I apologize for any of the banks in the room. Your franchisee, if it's their new owner, first location, they're not walking into their local bank and getting a loan. I know Sherry said, hey, it's possible. It's not possible. I have not seen it. I have not seen it in a long time, nor do you want that to happen. And the appetites are a very real thing. The banks that fund Little Jim at Unleashed Brands are not the banks that fund Urban Air. They all have different appetites, from level of ownership, investment range. I mean, there's some that get as specific as we're looking for businesses, brick and mortar, 250 and under in these 12 states. And we want people that have industry experience. And if you send somebody to that bank that doesn't meet those qualifications, the bank's going to say no. And remember what I said, they didn't say no because it didn't fit their appetite. We don't like the model, we don't think you're a good fit for it. And those are all things I'm sure you want your candidate to hear along the development process. Absolutely not. You don't want what your candidate's looking to get a loan for to be a surprise to the bank. I'm looking at this business. Oh yes, we've done those before. That's another thing. If you have franchisees that have gotten loans and you're not finding out what banks they worked with, you're doing yourself a big disservice. And last part, which Sherry and Rob touched on, I'll try to keep my passion on this one a little less, but have experience in the 401k rollover side. For any of you that feel that candidates have nerves or hesitations towards the idea of utilizing that retirement fund program, I am telling you the reason they do is because you do. If you are mentioning it like, well, sometimes people do this, or I don't know about it, but you could, they're picking it up from you. This should be something that drives your growth. This is not a loophole. This is not an avoidance. This is the same thing of any employee going to work today that has a 401k and invest that money in the employer they work for. They're already funding somebody's business with retirement funds. All they're doing in the ROBS program is they're funding their own instead. And that's the way you need to think about it, and it creates liquid. And how many of you have had franchisees not be able to get an SBA loan because they don't have enough liquid or post-closing liquid? So don't turn down any of these options, and if anything, especially if you're non-brick and mortar and you're looking to grow a little bit faster, you're going to want to use a rollover program, likely even more than an SBA loan, so they can get open and trained and marketing and selling a lot quicker than going through that process. So
Don't wait to get it going, right? I mean, it's a bit of a process. You're going to talk a little bit about the timing behind that?
Yeah, I mean, rollovers, I mean, if it's done correctly by the reputable companies that do it, because shockingly, just like in all of our businesses, there's people that say they do what others do just for less or cheaper or whatever. Don't do that. I would say on average, it's going to take 15 to 20 business days from start to finish on a rollover. And also you're going to want to make sure that they're structured corporately the right way, so they're not having to change their entity. And if those people are going to use that money for your franchise fee, you want that process started before they come to a discovery day, or at least that education to happen, which is why having a funding partner involved, not just as a funding partner, they need to be involved in your development process. It should be a checkpoint. Marketing review, territory review, financing, next. And if you're not doing that, it's going to take on its own form. So yes, getting that rollover in place and understanding what you can do with it. So if you have a partner, they'll explain to the candidate that if you pay cash up front, once the rollover is done, they can pay themselves back that money. So there's a lot of different things that you don't need to know because there's people that do. And I think probably the biggest point we haven't mentioned yet, I know this is a little unique in the franchising space. We keep saying have a partner, work with somebody. Rob, how much does it cost Repum to work with FranFund?
Free 99?
Free 90.
Free 99?
Free never heard of it.
Free,
It
sorry.
costs nothing when you have a funding partner.
Another excellent soundbite from Mr. Gambuzzi.
Sorry, Sherry, I want to add one thing for like the smaller emerging people in the room, right? Usually in a small emerging brand, the founder, CEO, whatever you want to call yourself, is also doing franchise sales. There'll come a time where you're not doing it anymore. And, I think another really important reason to work with a partner is because you're not a finance professional. And, if you're telling people and giving people advice on what they should do and you don't know their full financial picture and you're not looking at the different, impacts to their business and their personal life, you're going to have a lot of risk. And, it's just not something that you want to bring onto your business or onto yourself because you're not licensed to do this. You should be working with somebody who can give the right advice.
Not to get us off topic, but just to kind of piggyback on what you said, for those of you that are merging brands, you don't realize the impact that it will have on you if you get somebody in who's the wrong person or does not have the right amount of funding. And I don't mean just in terms of failure, the time suck of, and that's the only way I know to put it, of supporting them through that and trying to help them not have their life implode, and just all the emotions that go with that. It's just an enormous amount of input, and you're spending your time on that and not growing the brand.
There's a saying that I wish that I had been the author of. I'm not, but it's important nonetheless, and that is that businesses fail for a lot of reasons, but being overcapitalized is not one of them. So we had a discussion when we were planning for this panel among us, just talking about the fact that if you let somebody into your system that's skinny on money, you know, they've skinnied their way in, they've paid the fee, they've gone to training, they're open for 6 months. Somewhere in that 7 to 12-month period, that's where the skinny starts to show up in their inability to participate perhaps in a national marketing program or some other change or something they need to contribute to, and now they can't. And so from there on, it's pushing the noodle up a hill to make them successful. And so definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and something on that Rob had talked about with the item 7, and we talked about the registry and what you need. And remember, banks also work with FranData as well. So if you're not working with them to try to get some information out there, the information is still available. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And if you have an item 7 that says this much to this much, and the last 10 SBA loans that closed for your brand were 3 times that, yeah, good luck. So all that, by the way, all that information is available. It's out there, it's public, you might not know where to find it, and it's kind of spread all around, but there are ways for all people to find out these are the last 10 loans that were done for my brand and what that loan size was. And if they have that, and then they look at your numbers, and you have somebody saying it's going to cost me $250 to $350, and every loan's been over $500,000, yeah. And banks talk. You know, they'll say, yeah, remember this one that said it was this much, and now it's this much? We're not doing those anymore, and it will spread like a wildfire.
And don't let them just run, you know, wild, right? Help control that item 7. There's groups out there that can help you do that. We're one of them with our Build 'em division. We open 250, 300 doors a year. And if you need help with your item 7, come talk to me. I'd love to help you guys. Because at the end of the day, make or break it is in that item 7. And that's, you know, when you run skinny on capital, you go over on a project, don't let your franchisees do that. You have to control them. And then capture all that data so that your next refile is better, right? Look, we all make mistakes, and it's disclosed in item 7, you know, galore. But at the end of the day, if you have the data and you use that effectively, then, you know, you're going to be better. Your system's going to be better.
So what advice do you have if somebody does find that, oh, geez, we really can't get open, excuse me, for that 250 consistently? Do you make an amendment? Do you wait till next year to do your FDD? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, we disclose the hell out of it, you know, where there's certain ranges, but you know, candidly, yeah, you should be going out because it is a major risk. I'm not a lawyer, but at the end of the day, a lot of litigation comes out of that item 7, and you should definitely do an amendment to it if it's not hitting.
One thing I would add is we've had a general practice at Body 20 after year 2 of franchising that we add 20% to the bottom and the top of our range. Because I would rather have somebody, again, who's overcapitalized and expects a lot more in spend and has a lot less and is very happy coming in as a franchisee than somebody who came in and is not. And again, I speak to the emerging brands because I was there and I was sitting in this room trying to understand what to do to not make mistakes. Your first 10 franchisees are going to create your next 50, and those 50 will get you to that big number, whether it's 300, 500. But if they fail, if they, you know, thought it was 300 and it's 5, if they don't have the money to, you know, fund their business and they're freaking out personally and going down the spiral of bad decisions financially, then you're not going to grow anyways. So rather grow a little slower in the beginning to grow faster in the future than grow really fast in the beginning and everything comes to a stop and you go backwards.
I can attest to the fact that emerging franchisors get so excited when somebody's interested in their brand, even if their highest qualification is the ability to fog a mirror. So I would encourage anyone that's in that spot to just realize and capitalize on the fact that that is your brand story that you are bringing into your system. Is it going to be a good story or is it going to be sad? So with 5 minutes left, we only got one question out of the audience, and go, please.
How do you guys handle if like a franchisee comes in and
So my answer is going to be really simple. My attorney told me in the very beginning, and I've lived by this, small franchisors, emerging franchisors do not enforce their contract, and it's the biggest mistake they ever make. If they had 9 months to open and they did not open, they should be defaulted, they should sign a release, and they should sign your new item 7, understanding that it does cost more because inflation happens every year. If you don't do that, you're gonna deal with all the ramifications of somebody who thinks you misled them.
And I will add, I mean, in one of our models, Urban Air, I mean, 40,000 square feet doesn't fall out of trees every week. So sometimes when people turn down a site and it takes them longer, yes, we have some people that may have signed 2 years ago and it might have cost this much, but it's also important to keep those touch points happening along the way. If we're just waiting for them to find a site, and we haven't spoken to them as a brand in the last 18 months while they're looking, that's a problem as well. But I would still say that more than likely, I can't imagine that many costs got to a range where somebody was qualified for X and now they're not qualified for Y. My bet is that they never were qualified for it in the first place. But yes, we do, to Chris's point, you have to stick to the contract that you made with them and the expectations that they had. And if not, you got to move on and get that license placed somewhere else.
But you as a franchisor, you have the power, right? You're the one that is approving these sites or letting them go that far, down the path. And so if they are bringing you a site, 2 or 3 years later, and it isn't fitting, what they were sold or isn't fitting your model, don't approve the site. Like there's other options out there, right? But also have disclosure in your item 7 that certain reasons it can go over, right? It's not like these are the walls, you can't go outside of it. There's, if you don't have that in your item 7, you should get it.
It's more like they had a certain amount of money, right, it costs, and they have the different, like you're gonna spend X amount on equipment, and then the equipment package might have gotten a little bit more. So how does that get communicated to the bank? Like, should that be communicated to the bank right away? Like, it's gonna cost them more to get this equipment?
Here's what I'll tell you about that. My VP of Lending is sitting right here in case I screw this up. But if there's a loan package at a lender, they're not looking at it while nothing's happening. So they will re-ask for updates on things, and that will be the opportunity that the candidate has to disclose the new numbers. And because they won't, that's so stale, it's been in the circular file for quite some time. You just need to start all over again.
I just want to add to close that loan, they're going to have to provide like a final equipment invoice, if there's construction, a construction contract. So the bank is going to see those final numbers, and if it ends up making it to where the loan amount is no longer enough, they will have to go back in underwriting to reapprove them for that higher amount.
If I could add just something that I think is a little preemptive on your side as a franchisor, is we don't approve people who have, if it's $500,000 to open a Body 20, we don't approve people that are worth $500,000. We're approving people that are worth, I think our requirements right now are $250,000 in cash and $850,000 in net worth. That's actually viable. So not like a business that I started that I think is worth this much money, but truly like I have equity in my home, I have cash savings bonds, those types of things. That way, when they do have to go back, because those things happen, life changes, then they're not saying, well, you were approved for 5, you're not approved for 6, right?
Sorry. You just said something. So, I mean, Sherry and I, we always joke, 3 things matter most for your candidates when they're going to get an SBA loan. Liquidity. Everyone tell me the third. There we go. Come on, louder. Liquidity. Okay, that wasn't good, guys. Come on. But this goes to the liquid requirements that you all have in your FDDs. I promise you, making it lower does not get you the more candidates that you want to get. You didn't want them in the first place. And please, no, I don't think anybody does this. Why people don't adjust that for multiple licenses is amazing to me. It's like, oh, it's a $100,000 liquid. I'm buying 3 licenses. Does anyone have it written that, well, then they should have this much? Because that creates a lot of issues along the way, because that liquid gets tied up by the additional licenses, and then they have to put more liquid into the project for the first one. I would love to see a world where people get rid of the flat number and make it a percentage of the project and say the minimum liquid requirement is 30% of the project cost in your market. Because telling somebody they need $100,000 and they're opening one in Indiana, and telling that same person they need $100,000 opening one in Los Angeles, very different. Very, very different. So,
And you can always adjust those numbers, right?
Correct.
Like if, as you go through these learning experiences and someone might be tight and that was, an issue, go back and change your requirements on the sales side. You don't have to refile your FDD to do that. You can do it any day you want.
Excellent. Any one last question? We have 1 minute. Yes, ma'am.
When our first franchisee went to get SBA loan, he used a company for, the business plan that he had to use. Are there certain companies that are good for that? He wanted to make sure it was the best, and he ended up getting the SBA loan.
Oh, okay. Again, moderator not supposed to be on the panel. No, it's an excellent question. Here's the simple answer. The franchise system is the business plan. So you don't need to go to an external company and have them make a beautiful 4-color, 20-page brochure explaining about a franchise system that exists with the franchise system. What the franchisee will have to do, or the potential one, well, they'll have to do their own projections, their own plan, that kind of thing. But in terms of selling the brand to the lender, not necessary.
Can I add to that real quick?
Please.
I think one of the greatest things we ever did at Body 20 that really allowed us to not just sell franchises and get them open, but make them successful, is that we started at multiple points in the process. We do it before you sign a lease, which is around the time you're going to be submitting to your final approval anyways. We do it before they open their doors, and then we do it monthly. We actually check in on this. We build like a full financial model. I want you to see 5 years out and have plans and goals and get there. And I don't expect my franchisee who's never run this business to understand it. So we do that from our side. And then they can take that and use that with the bank, right? Now, we're not going to do it for them, but we show them how the business is going to work, and then they take some of those numbers and they give them to the bank.
Just do that after you sign the franchise.
But
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. After they sign. But yeah, to go to the exact, yes, there are companies that will package the deal to get it to the lender, provide the lender everything that they need. But to Sherry's point, there are some that are out there that will sell a much larger price product and sell all this level of detail that, one, they don't need, and two, I promise you, the bank's not looking at. The business plan, a lot of times, it's like, okay, they handed it in. It's kind of like the book report. They did it. Now let's go look at the numbers and everything else, and working with partners that actually do that. So Fran Fund, I know there's others that are out there, but take it from me, who was on that side. It's not easy to be the #1 ranked funding supplier. It's for a reason, and they'll let you know what you need, what you don't need, and they'll coordinate that with the bank. And it's free 99.
$3.99. Okay, I want to thank this very esteemed panel for your time and input today. Thank you so much.